Hey Slava, sorry it took me so long to get to this, but here we go. Your 6 questions. Number 1. How did the development of Syphon Filter 2 start? Well, it started immediately. Actually, what happened was we put the finishing touches and burned our final gold master copy of the game and sent it off. And then the company was basically given a week off. Everybody, you worked very, very hard. We all worked incredibly hard. Everybody take the week off, fully paid. And except for you two. Except for you, John, and you, Richard. John was the lead artist and I was the lead designer. You need to keep working so that when everybody comes back in a week, they've got a blueprint for what this sequel is going to be, because we had our marching orders very immediately that we had to get the sequel done in under a year. And that was going to be very, very tough. It was a real challenge, especially because we were really ambitious with the sequel. There are so many things we wanted to do in the original Syphon Filter that we just couldn't pull together. And so SF2 was going to be our big push in every regard, and we threw so much stuff in. Multi-CD, multiplayer, improved cinematics, new gameplay concepts, tons and tons of stuff. And yet we got the thing done from start to finish in under a year. But like I said, it started with me and John basically spending a solid week hammering out the storyline and all the locations that I wanted to go to, the story he wanted to tell. I dimly recall, for some reason, the two of us sitting in the back of his pickup truck working on this stuff. But we didn't have much time. So it was just, hit the ground, full speed running to try and get it done as fast as possible, even with all the new elements in it. Number 2, what new development tricks did we come up with? What are improvements to the engine? The knife works great. The scariest weapon in Deathmatch. That's very cool. Thank you. Well, there was a lot of stuff that went into the game. John, the lead artist, his primary focus was he wanted to do better, more intricate storytelling. Especially because this time we actually had a plan for the story from start to finish. We weren't constantly just jumbling things around at the last second to make levels work and whatnot. And he wanted to do a lot more cinematics. So for the first time, we actually had 2 CDs. The reason we were a 2 CD game is because there were so many cutscenes that were made for the sequel. And, at the same time, they were improving the quality of the cinematic models and stuff like that. In the original Syphon Filter, all of the models for the movies were just the game models, where he did a little extra stuff to animate their faces, literally doing old school 2D animation, manually hand animating the mouths moving and stuff like that. So John wanted to really push the storytelling, and that's great. And what I wanted to push was the in-game storytelling, because it was important to me too. There were so many cool action movie moments that we had wanted to create in Syphon Filter, but we couldn't because Jeff, the other designer, we had very, very simple tools. We just had splines, which are basically long lines that we could use to determine where the bad guys would walk and when they would crouch and when they would roll and stuff like that. And then we had big boxes that would activate and deactivate things. And if we wanted to do anything cool other than just activating and deactivating bad guys, we had to beg, borrow, and steal from the programmers to say, hey, could you program me this special circumstance? And we had a few special circumstances like escorting Leon out of the catacombs. That required a lot of special case code. But when we got to the sequel, both Jeff and I had big ideas of stuff we wanted to do. I think, if I recall correctly, we were probably influenced a lot by Half-Life at the time, because it had a lot of really cool, memorable moments. And so, the co-founder of the company and the one of the senior programmers, Mark Blank, who, by the way, was the creator of the original PC adventure game Zork back in the 70s. Mark came up with a scripting system. It's like a simplified programming language that he taught Jeff and I how to use. It was called Syphon Script. And with that, we could make happen whatever we could think of. We had control over, more than just spawning and despawning bad guys. We can make them do whatever we wanted to do. And, I've still got some of those old Syphon scripts that I wrote for the original Colorado level, I think. And they're fairly complex bits of code that allowed us to create really interesting cause and effect chains, and, like we spend a lot more time in Syphon Filter 2 working alongside non-player characters who can do things on their own, and you kind of coordinate with them. And we were also to be able to create a lot more interesting cinematic moments that happen real time, not as part of a cutscene, but to happen to you in the game. And that was probably, I think, the biggest push overall from my perspective anyway. There are other things too, like, I know not everybody likes the enemy snipers who go for headshots against you. Me, I love them because it kind of forces you to play the way I'd always kind of hoped. A lot of people play Syphon Filter and just stand still and shoot and take some damage and then go pick up a health pack, and there's nothing, recover flakjack. There's nothing wrong with that, but I always wanted players to keep moving, and shooting on the fly. More like Die Hard, or a really cool Hollywood action movie, or the works of John Woo. I want to have more of that feeling, and so when we found people actually playing the original game, pretty much a lot of people, they just stood still, took some damage. I'm like, no. Well, now if you stand still, you will die. And there's nothing more terrifying in the game than when you're running along, there's going, headshots, suddenly appears above your head, and you're like, I gotta hide, I gotta run, I gotta dodge, I gotta duck, I gotta roll. And I love that. I think I made some mistakes. Believe me, I made plenty of mistakes in my 20 years of making video games. I think one of the biggest mistakes I ever made working on Syphon Filter, well, there were two mistakes that I made working on Syphon Filter. One, I've talked about in other interviews. We started out making all these very, very cool scripted scenes. Interactive in-game moments. And then the testers from Sony started testing them and would find a million ways to break them. And suddenly, hey, your script doesn't deal with what if I go over here? What if I kill this person before that person? Whatever it might be. And, the more we got those bug reports, because we did not have time, what I would have liked to have done is spent time scripting to deal with every single thing that players could come up with. So it was a true sandbox where you could do whatever you want, and the game would respond to you. That's what we wanted to do, but remember, we had less than a year from start to finish to make this game. And, and neither Jeff nor I were even, professional programmers in the first place. So as often as not, when one of those bugs came up, our solution had to be, okay, well, let's just change the level a bit so you can't do that. Problem solved. And as a result, it made, especially like the bridge in Colorado is a really great example. There is one way to play that level. Didn't used to be. Used to be, there were like a dozen different ways you could play that level. But as more and more things broke, I just had to simplify it and streamline it down to where, nope, it's interesting. In some ways, it's good because a lot of the levels became puzzles to solve, which was certainly not a thing we had in the original Syphon Filter. The original Syphon Filter was just all, gung-ho, run action, except for the occasional stealth. Whereas now, we had these sometimes very, very challenging puzzles. Where, okay, well, I've got to figure out, if that person's over there, and then, I wait for them to way over there and turn their back to me, then I can, take this guy out silently, but then I have to hide again, and that's cool, because I like puzzles. I'm surrounded by puzzles right now on all my walls, but it went too far, and I think a little bit of the flexibility and the freedom players had in the first game was lost, and that was a mistake. My other big mistake is getting back to those evil headshot snipers that you'd go up against. Here's the thing. Like I said, I always wanted players to spend most of their time in motion. Never stop moving, never stop shooting. That's why you had the target lock. You could be strafing and rolling and still shooting at somebody. And if you were in motion, they were less likely to hit you. Nobody pays attention to the danger meter, which is so stupid because I should have put the danger meter on the player. Because, because when you're looking at the screen, you're looking at yourself, you're looking at the bad guys. You don't have time to look at the little meters up in the top left corner of the screen. Because if you look, you will notice that, if you strafe sideways, their chance to hit you doesn't go up. When you roll, their chance just goes completely down. And by the same token, when you duck and shoot, when you crouch, or if you more directly face them, your chance to hit them goes up. There's all these things going on that nobody realizes because I kind of hid it up in the corner. And, I should have fixed that. Like the way that Call of Duty very smartly says, oh, when you get shot, we'll just make, you don't have a life meter in Call of Duty. We'll just say, oh, when you shot, how much damage you have just fills up the whole screen. When you're shooting at somebody, how likely you are to hit them is literally in your targeting reticle as it grows and shrinks. Don't hide that in the corner. Put it on the screen where players can see it. And I don't know why. It never occurred to me. Huge failure on my part. And when I brought those snipers in, I should have done the same thing for them. That when headshot appears over your head, the word headshot with a little line pointing your head should have also had a progress meter showing you have this much time. Like boom, you're dead. So that you know how much time you have. And you could see that if you start dodging and taking evasive maneuvers, look, as long as you stand still, boom, they're gonna kill you. But if you start maneuvering, it's going, I have time. I can dodge, I can keep shooting at them. Why didn't I put that in the little headshot thing? And by the same token, when, and I should have done this in the original game too, whenever you start shooting at somebody and they have a flak jacket, it drives me nuts that nobody understands. Just keep shooting. If you put like 20 or 30 rounds into them, and normally to take out a regular bad guy, it takes, 3 to 5 bullets and they're down, right? 20 or 30 bullets will cut through anybody's flak jacket. And so my intention was, okay, I can't shoot them. Okay, I've got 2 ways to deal with this person who has a flak jacket. Either find cover and then start peekaboo, try to get the headshot, all that kind of thing, or just keep moving and just keep shooting. In Syphon Filter, it breaks the rules of guns. The longer you shoot, the more accurate you get, the more lead you are throwing at bad guys. Of course, that's, Rainbow Six, did the opposite, said, hey, the longer you shoot, because this is reality, the longer you shoot, the worse your accuracy gets. But I said, no, I want it to be like a movie. I wanted to encourage players to shoot, and keep shooting. And if you pay attention to your target meter, the longer you shoot a rapid fire, the more likely you are to take them out. And you can totally rip right through flak jackets. It takes a clip of ammunition to do it instead of just a few shots. But that's okay, because after you take them out, you go over there and you pick up their ammunition and you keep the fight going. But nobody understands that, because it's my fault. I hid all that information in the top left corner of the screen, and nobody looks at that. So why didn't I put, when I start shooting at somebody and it says flak jacket, why don't I see a little, behind the words flak jacket, a little meter going brrrr, so players can see, oh, I can just keep shooting. It's like they've got a lot of hit points, because that's all it is. Here's an interesting thing. If you shoot, the more you shoot at them, when you eventually go pick up that flak jacket, it has less healing properties for you. So if you go for a headshot, it will heal you up 100%. If you, if you try to wear them down, but then go into hiding and then finish them off, it'll only have 50% of the health. I mean, there are all these little things in the game that to this day, nobody realizes, and it's all my fault because I hid that information. Instead of finding ways to bring the interface into the screen, I put it off to the sides, because that's the way interfaces were always done up until Rainbow Six and other games. So, but anyway, long story short, I love the headshot bad guys because I know how to play to avoid being killed by them, but they're terrifying. They're very scary. They startle you and they make you change the way you play. But I know a lot of people don't like them because a lot of people, it's my fault, don't know the best way to take evasive maneuvers in the game. Don't realize how incredibly important it is to roll. If you're not shooting, be rolling if you're under fire. And nobody will hit you, including the headshot guys, but whatever. So what else was there? I noticed you mentioned the knife. The funny thing is, the knife was actually originally in Syphon Filter 1. And, we had included it there as what the weapon you would use if you ran out of ammunition. And you're like, what am I gonna do? I guess I gotta use my knife to finish these guys off. But we found it was impossible to use because you had to get up close and personal. So we cut it from Syphon Filter 1 and replaced it with a taser, which I think everybody is very happy with. But, we had so little time to make this sequel. Anything that we could do to add new features that didn't require much work, we did. That's why the knife came back. And we really include, like I said, it works well in the deathmatch if you're a sneaky player, but it also works well in stealth mode, right? As an alternative, way to take people out rather than shooting them from a distance. And, we went out of our way to script sequences where you had to do that. So there were lots of little things like that, but certainly the biggest the biggest things in Syphon Filter 2 are the scripting language, which gave Jeff and me so much control over the game in a way that was really liberating and really allowed us to flex our creative muscle. The multiplayer game, which I'm very, very proud of. It's genuinely fun to play, even now. Even if it is, everything about Syphon Filter is very primitive compared to what we have nowadays. But it's still fun to play. And it was a major technical achievement to be able to have effectively 2 copies of Syphon Filter running at the same time, because the game was not originally designed to do that. It's actually interesting. It's kind of took inspiration from the multiplayer mode that was in Bubsy 3D that nobody remembers, where one player controlled Bubsy and the other player controlled the camera trying to kill Bubsy. Or the other player was like a sniper. So, we've done a little bit of it, but it was still a really big deal to be able to pull that off. I guess those are things that really stick out to me the most. How did you come up with the idea to make a deathmatch mode? What ideas didn't make it into the game? Well, it was just like the obvious thing. Of course you wanted to put a multiplayer mode in. Consoles. I grew up. I didn't grow up. I was an adult during the days of, the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis and all of that. And, it used to be that, it was a really standard thing to have people play multiplayer games together on the couch. That was, that was something that kind of got lost, except for, maybe racing games and, what do you call it? Beat 'em ups. But there wasn't much in the way of multiplayer gaming on console, and we really wanted to do it. We were fans of it every time it popped up in PC games, and we thought, hey, let's bring that back. Let's give players, let's not have 2 people sitting down and enjoying the game, but only one player gets to play at a time. So the deathmatch mode was just kind of a no-brainer, and it was, I am sure, technically the biggest hurdle, the biggest challenge that Chris Reese and his programmers had to overcome to be able to pull it off. And, I think it works really well. I'm very proud of it. As for what didn't make it into the game, nothing. Because here's the deal. Everything we set out to do, there were very few things we ended up cutting because we didn't start working on something because we only had a year. If we didn't think we were going to be able to get it done, we didn't even spend any time on it. And, that year restriction, I don't know, it's probably pretty obvious. Hey, why are we going back to the museum from Syphon Filter 1? Because it means we get a major portion of a level for free because we already made that level. All we have to do is just change the story and say, oh, the museum's been shut down and they're packing stuff away. So let's just take the old level. We still had the level files and put a bunch of crates all over the place so we can make different kinds of gameplay in the same environment we were in before. That wasn't because we said, oh, let's try and, revisit, and for nostalgia, let's just get another level on the cheap because we have to get this game done under a year. Everything was driven by that. And I'm sure there's probably a few things here and there that we wanted to do, but I can't remember any because mostly I remember what we were able to do in just an insanely short period of time. Again, from start to finish, that game was done in under 12 months. And honestly, I look back at it now and I have no idea how we pulled that off other than just pretty much a nonstop year of crunching for everybody because that's the way it was back in the day. Syphon Filter 3 was originally a multiplayer game, Diablo plus Counter-Strike for PlayStation 2. How much did you manage to do before leaving? That is true. Originally, we were not going to do Syphon Filter 3. We were going to be a PlayStation 2 title. Originally, we were supposed to be a launch title, but then we were pushed back to, okay, we'll be out within the first year of PlayStation 2. We were going to be called Syphon Filter Online. And that was because, there were 2 groups of people who really loved multiplayer PC gaming in the studio. People who loved Counter-Strike and people who loved Diablo. And me, I loved them both, and I wanted to bring them together. I wanted to have, the online teamwork of Counter-Strike. Where players are like, okay, let's get into position and I'll draw their attention and you stand by ready to snipe them. All those kinds of moments that you get in a really fun multiplayer game where you're just shouting at each other. Every night after work, I still remember, there were a couple of artists, Brian and Martin, who just You could hear them from everywhere in the building because the two of them would log in, and they're by this point we were big enough. Syphon Filter 1 was a big enough success that everybody got offices instead of everybody working in just one big gigantic warehouse room where we were all basically worked in a gigantic attic. And everybody was in the same room in Syphon Filter 1. But Syphon Filter 1 was such a success, we were able to get like a nice proper, everybody had their own individual offices. But Martin and Brian were in separate offices, and they pretty much, I assume we must have had phones with intercoms, but they couldn't be bothered to do that. They were just shouting at the top of their lungs to each other, "Get over here, save me," all that kind of stuff. And I was so inspired by that, I wanted to bring that into Syphon Filter. And what I really loved about Diablo was all the role-playing elements and, building a character and leveling them up, and randomly generated worlds, which to this day is still not something that you see done, but that is what we were experimenting with. A third-person shooter with randomly generated worlds. And so we spent not very long, unfortunately. We spent a couple of months working on Syphon Filter Online. I got pretty much the entire design worked out. Everything we wanted to do, we had plans for everything. We knew how we were going to be doing storytelling within a randomly generated world, and yet we had actually fixed moments that would have the world evolve and all the rest of it. And then Sony got on the phone and said, "Hey, you know what? When PlayStation 2 comes out, there's still going to be way more PlayStations than PlayStation 2s. Could you just put this whole Syphon Filter Online thing on hold, and we'll come back to that later because we really need a Syphon Filter 3." And then Syphon Filter 3 had to be done in even less time than Syphon Filter 2, as I recall. And by that point, that was so crushing for me. I mean, I was working on my dream game, which I ultimately ended up getting to go on and do many, many years later with Brink. But, the stuff I did in Brink, I was trying to do in Syphon Filter Online a decade earlier. And when that got canceled, I realized, well, I feel like I've done everything I can do with Syphon Filter without, being able to take it to the next level. And so that's when I realized, you know what? I've been doing this for a while now. I should really branch out and try to do different. I want to do a platformer. I ended up working on The Sims. I ended up doing all kinds of stuff. I was on Fable 2. But, so when I decided to leave, I stayed around long enough to help with the, the transition to, so that Jeff Ross, who was, was like the other designer, I was the lead designer, Jeff was a designer, there's just the two of us, and now he became the lead designer and worked with another designer of his own, and so he was able to take over. The main thing I worked on before I left, because we were still using Syphon script, and it had been updated and we were able to do more stuff with it, as a holdover from Syphon Online, where we were going for the idea of randomly generated worlds and randomly generated objectives. So even if you took the same mission a second time, it would be radically different. You never knew where bad guys were gonna go. You always had to act, you couldn't memorize things. That was so important to me. And so, for Syphon Filter 3, one little piece of that lives on, and those are those mini games, which I'm very proud of. Before I left, I did all the scripting for all the minigames. Now, as I understand it, Jeff had to take those over, and I wouldn't be surprised if he had to rip my scripts apart and redo them. I've never really talked to him about it afterwards. But I did the original scripting for the death, or the kill 'em all mode and the sneak 'em mode and the objective mode. And for me, it was the same basic idea as the death matches. We had these little tiny arenas, but instead of going up against another player and just head-to-head kill 'em ups, we had to complete a series of objectives, and every time you play, the bad guys will be in different places, the objectives will be in different places, you will be in different places, and I'm really proud of that. I left with, and we had variable difficulty levels and all of that, and I mean, I'm pretty proud of where they ended up. The hope was that not only would we have those mini games, but they would be cooperative as well. That, if you want to talk about one thing that did not make it into Syphon Filter 1, 2, or 3 that was so important to me, but it's my own fault because I left. I am sure if I had stayed, I probably would have had the clout to be able to say, okay, what compromises are we going to make sure that these little mini games, which were just like a passion project for me, nobody else cared about them. The artists wanted to work on big levels. They didn't want to work on these little things and all of that. But to me, it was very important, and I would have pushed hard to say, hey, they're co-op as well. But I left, and Jeff, he had to take over for me, and he did an amazing job considering the circumstances. He really rose to the challenge and got that done. So I had done the scripting and the design for the minigames, and or at least the first pass on them. And then the other thing I did was I was working on the development for the Tokyo level, the opening level of the game. It was the opening level, wasn't it? I'm pretty sure Tokyo was the opening level. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was. And, I remember spending a lot of time scripting out making a functional elevator that would let you go to different floors of the hotel and stuff like that. I think all that stuff got stripped out and simplified and streamlined because, hey, I didn't stick around to finish it. And as I said in Syphon Filter 2, sometimes we have big elaborate ideas and we have to simplify and streamline them down to make sure that they will actually work and not be too bug-ridden. Because this was back in the day when you couldn't release patches. The game shipped the way it shipped, and if there were bugs, there was nothing to do to fix them. So you had to work that much harder and make that many more compromises. But I remember working on, the casual walking in and getting a key and taking the elevator up, and then I'm doing the across the street sniper fight, which I thought was very, very cool. And then you had to fight your way out. I don't think I finished it because ultimately I left and Jeff took over, and I'm sure finished the work I had done on that. So pretty much the only thing in Syphon Filter 3 you'll see from me are the mini games, a little bit of the opening content, because I had always done. I mean, everything in Washington, D.C. was done by me in Syphon Filter 1. Everything in the mountains was done by me in Syphon Filter 2. I'd always taken the first levels, and so I was working on the Tokyo stuff, but then ultimately I realized, I just can't keep doing this. I've been doing this for over half a decade now, and I just feel like I'm burned out and done, and I need to do something different. Syphon Filter Online was gonna be that something different for me, and when it had to be delayed, and we had to go back to doing more of the same old, I just lost my enthusiasm, and I said goodbye to everybody, and I ultimately got to play that game like everybody else as a regular consumer, and when it came out, and that boss fight they did with the tank, forget about Uncharted and their tank, and was it Uncharted 2? I mean, geez Louise, we were years ahead of the curve. That was amazing. I have no idea how Jeff and company pulled that off. And, there was a lot of really cool stuff. There was some stuff that didn't work as well because, of course, there was, a gun that could shoot through walls. That was awesome. So there were a lot of cool things, but Syphon Filter 3 is not very much me because I was out the door by then. What locations were included in the final game after the cancellation of the online version? Actually, I believe the only things from Syphon Filter Online in terms of locations was the Tokyo position. The reason there was a Tokyo level at all is because one of the artists, Martin, it was Martin again, the Counter-Strike aficionado. Martin, in between Syphon 2 and Syphon 3, while we were doing pre-production on Syphon Filter Online, he made a trip to Tokyo, Japan. He went on vacation. And while he was there, he just took pictures of everything. He took hundreds and hundreds of pictures, so that we could recreate, on PlayStation 2 graphics, which were such a huge jump from PlayStation 1. We were gonna have this amazing looking, wow, you feel like you're in Tokyo. And so I guess some of those textures made it into probably if you look at the opening cutscene where Leon and Gabe drive up in a van, that was what Syphon Filter Online's Tokyo level was going to look like in real time on the PlayStation 2. If you want to get a sense for what we were shooting for, that opening cutscene is the only relic, because of course you couldn't do anything. Any of the terrain we had built was too high poly. The textures were too high resolution. The PlayStation 1 couldn't handle any of that, which is why you don't get outside. You don't have a fight through the streets of Tokyo the way you did through the streets of Moscow, because there was no time and we didn't build it that way from the start. So really, I think the only thing of Syphon Filter Online anybody will ever see is the opening cutscene of Syphon Filter 3. The other level, I remember in pre-production we were working on 2 levels. We were working on a test to see, right, how high detailed can we make environments? And we were doing that with Tokyo because we had all this real world footage that Martin had brought back from vacation. And then we were doing theoretical designs on an Italian villa. And that was where we were working out, right, how can this villa be unique and different? Different locations of buildings and interiors and exteriors, so every time you play, it's gonna be completely different. So John and I were doing a lot of experimenting with that. Breaking things into quadrants and things being able to automatically snap together programmatically. But I don't think any of that stuff made it into the game. So, it's all, maybe some of that stuff made it into Omega Strain, but I didn't work on Syphon Filter Omega Strain, so I couldn't tell you. But certainly, Syphon Filter Omega Strain has a lot of the stuff. I mean, for me, Syphon Filter Online, there was two things that I really wanted to push. I love this idea of, okay, you're not Gabe anymore, you work for Gabe, and so you are a character who levels and grows. The interface you use for interacting with the world, one of the things every player, when they create their character, was also going to get to create their home base, whether they, had a yacht in, the Mediterranean, or a high-rise apartment in New York, or a rustic cabin in the Alaskan wilderness or whatever. Everybody had their own little thing, and when you started up the game in Syphon Filter Online, you found yourself in your home base, and you could interact with your computer to take missions, and you could interact with your closet to do character customization. I mean, I really want that sense of, I live in this world. And, because this is long before that kind of stuff became normal, and we, see, so much of that, living online kind of things now. That's what I was really wanting to push. But then I also wanted to push players working together. And so a lot of that made Syphon Filter Online. I mean, more than I ever thought. Like, hey, one person boosting another person up and lifting each, all that kind of stuff. I'm so happy they got into Omega Strain. But, I was long gone by then. I was working on Pitfall and Sims by that time. Updated character designs in the third game. Is this due to the fact that the game was originally developed for PlayStation 2? Have you been creating extra missions for Syphon Filter 3? Well, first of all, the character design, I imagine, but I don't know. You would have to ask John Garvin, but I would not be surprised if, again, those characters you see in the cutscenes that look much nicer than anything we had ever had, those were probably readopted from the work we were doing to figure out, right, what do our PlayStation 2 characters look like? Oh, we cut our PlayStation 2 game. All right, let's put those PlayStation 2 characters into our PlayStation 1 cutscenes. I don't know if that's true or not, because again, I was gone, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. And have I been creating other extra missions for Syphon Filter 3? Well, I think I already told you that story. So, all right, that's it. And hopefully your next video does even better than the one before. I am now going to stop recording and get this out to you. Thanks, buddy. Bye.